Hey guys, this is Fernando doing another video for Mars Survivalists. In this case I want to take a little bit more time and laid back type of video talking about what's life like after an economic collapse in general. I've been writing about it for many years, and for you guys that don't know who I am, my name is Fernando Aguirre. I've been writing about survival and preparedness since 2001, 2002. I lived in Argentina most of my life, and the economy collapsed there in December 2001. We ended up defaulting on our national debt of $132 billion. Banks froze people's accounts, and you couldn't get your money out of the banks, and the accounts in dollars were turned to pesos, and people ended up losing 70% of their savings because of that. There was inflation during those first weeks. Prices in some cases doubling or going up 3 times as much depending on the product. So it was pretty bad and all that stuff. Now that I'm in a place, I left Argentina last year, and now that I'm seeing things from a different perspective, I think it's a good moment to talk a little bit more about all those little details of life in general, what it was like. I ended up writing a book about it. Here it's the Modern Survival Manual, Surviving the Economic Collapse. It's in Amazon. There's a link there in my videos. Mostly because it's all the experience that I've gained through that turned into a manual, and there's no way I can put the same knowledge in a 20-minute video than in 100,000 words in a book. So that's if you want to learn more about that stuff, that's what it's there for. But people will ask me in general, what is it like, life in general, living that way after all that happens? And in general, my two most the two things that I always mention as being the main concerns are, of course, the economy. When something like that happens, and unemployment goes through the roof, there's 25-30% unemployment, maybe more, you don't even know, because all the numbers are cooked or manipulated in one way or another. And so maybe you don't even have a job, or even if you do, there's the issue of inflation melting, like snow. The money is melting in your pocket, and it's buying less and less stuff as time goes by. Of course, that's a concern. That's something that worries you. I was sending my kid to a certain school, then you cannot afford that anymore. You have to go to another one, or then go back and forth. Or the same thing with medical care you can afford. You're always worried about what it's gonna be like for you next week. It's not only about you getting fired, or much worse, if you don't have a job, finding a job and all that stuff, but what are you going to be doing next month or next year when you cannot afford anything anymore? If you have a 25% inflation per year, then your salary, if it's not going up accordingly, you have to keep cutting, and your life in general starts turning much worse. Then there's the problem of crime. As all this happens, there's more crime on the streets, and there's less money to deal with it. There's a problem with infrastructure and everything in general. There's less money to build prisons and put people in jail and such. So instead of just releasing the prisoners that they have already in jail, and the jails are already overpopulated, what they did was adopt a political stance of, we're not putting more people in jail. Even serious criminals, even murderers, they would go home with a bracelet because there was no space in prison anymore. In general, the political stance was, turn them loose, don't put them into jail to begin with, don't even start a case against anyone to begin with, because there's no way of putting all these people in jail. That was in general what was happening. So you start seeing all these crime problems going up, and you start worrying. And you can, to some extent, deal with the economic problem, the financial problem. You may find people helping you out, friends, family. Now, there's nothing you can do when a loved one gets hurt. You cannot do anything when there's a home invasion and they kill someone, they rape someone, they torture you or your family or whatever. That's just too late. Man, that's the end game for you. You cannot go back in time. You may wish you have done things very differently, but you cannot. And that was, at least for us, for me and my family, was a concern of us. We were looking forward to leaving Argentina, which we actually managed to do, and successfully so. But that was one of my greatest fears, was something happening to us just before we leave. Just before we leave, something's going to be happening to us. I'm going to be getting hurt myself. My wife's going to be getting hurt. We took, during the last weeks, we went really intense in terms of security, very much so. We had always been that way, I suppose, because one of the differences now, looking at it from a different perspective, which, the reason why I'm doing this video, it really helps being in a different place, is that we always had that perspective of a different future for us. We knew that life like that wouldn't be for us forever. So, we were thinking of, next year. It was always next year for us, until it got to a point where we had to bug out pretty fast. We were always talking, we're going to be going to the States and this and that. Next year or the following one. We always had that hope, I suppose, that perspective of a better life in the future. So we were extra cautious in our current moment. We didn't take risks. I'm talking about not even going to see our family because they're a couple miles away, and you knew that Christmas night, Christmas Eve was not the best idea to go around certain neighborhoods and such. So we took huge precautions, and not only because of that, there was actually many incidents of people that got hurt right before leaving. In many cases, that was related to a problem of loose lips sink ships. That phrase that people were saying. They mentioned maybe to a friend, and that friend mentioned it to someone else. If that ended up in the wrong ears, and if you're leaving a country, there's a good chance that you have some cash to do so. So it would happen that people actually about to leave, usually were leaving people from Argentina going to Spain, and usually they would get hit because of that. In some cases, it was people leaving after something awful happened to them. If there was a break-in, a home invasion where someone got raped, or one of the kids got tortured or killed, something awful like that, people would run away the following day. I know of a couple of cases like that. One was in San Isidro, that a family suffered something like that, and the following day they bought tickets and they left to live with some friend of theirs in Spain. It's just too damn late, When you wait until that happens, we didn't want to be those people. We didn't want to be those guys that run away after something awful happens to them, or what happened to this pregnant woman, that she got shot in the belly after leaving the bank in a salidera. We didn't want to be those guys. So that was one of the differences. I suppose that if you don't have that perspective of a better life, of living differently, what happens in your mind internally is that you say, okay, I'm not going to be going nuts over this. I'm not going to be worrying every single day of my life. I'll just live as happily as I can, and whatever happens, happens. That's by far the most common approach to the problem in Argentina. That's the way most people live there. There are quite a bit of people like myself, though, that we would do all the self-defense stuff, the firearms training, all that stuff. Lots of us doing that, but by far the minority, But yet those of us that did it, we were pretty intense about it, We were pretty, and we eventually became very good at it, because it wasn't something that we did for fun on weekends. It was something that we did so as to improve our chances of keeping our family and ourselves safe on a very real, very imminent threat out the door. The problem was there. It was kind of interesting because I must have been one of the few guys that left without, there's people that after receiving the training, just a couple of weeks later, they would come back and say, yes, someone broke into my house, they did this and that, and I did this and that, and thankfully it worked. And maybe we would go through the particular incident, seeing what had been done right and wrong, and doing all that. But it was like a learning process, with constant feedback in terms of what worked and what didn't. So that was pretty neat, I suppose. It was very sad in some cases because you don't always make it. We had our friend Hernan Pecora who got murdered in his house, and there's nothing that you can do after that. It's pretty sad. But yeah, that's what life was. I suppose it's very stressful in a way. The more you think about it, the more you try to keep yourself and your family safe from all that, the more you worry, and it stresses you out in many ways. That's one more thing that standing from where I am now, I see it that the society in Argentina, people in general, are far less polite than in more civilized, in better off places. People in Argentina are more rude in general. They will react more aggressively to certain things. If there's typical thing, a car accident of some sort, you crash against someone in the street, instead of being a matter of just changing your insurance, sometimes it got ugly, it got very, very bad. There's many cases of people actually killing one another in such stupid incidents, because in general the society is more violent. You're stressed out, you're worried, and it affects everything. Even in school, my son, back then 7-8 years old, he would get into fights in school that were, man, awful stuff. And he had to learn how to defend himself from bullies and all that stuff. And at some point you feel, for example, when he would successfully do so, you would feel happy that he managed to protect himself and stand for himself. But why is it that a 7-year-old has to be beating the crap out of another kid in a private school? Why is that? And did it change him to the kind of person that he is? Would he be better off if he hadn't gone through something like that? Yeah, I suppose so. With my younger son, I suppose he's a kid that hasn't gone through that sort of stuff, and he's better off because of that. At some point, I used to think that it makes for a tougher person, going through that stuff at an early age. But then you think, no, that's really not the way it's supposed to be. It basically affects everything. It affects society. It affects culture. You see it degrading into a shadow of what it once was. The political system is embarrassing. Like what we have now in Argentina with a president that stays in power like they are now. It's like Venezuela. You think, yeah, we're never gonna be like crappy Venezuela, and one day you are. One day you freaking are like Venezuela. The culture in general, the education system, which was the envy of every other country in the region, has become 50% of the kids don't even finish school, and I think it was like 30% of those that even start first grade don't finish secondary school, and that's all politically orchestrated so as to have people that will put their heads down and just allow others to step on them. Maybe a good comparison of what's life after an economic collapse is, think of everything think of your life, your society, your culture, and imagine that someone throws acid all over that, and it corrodes and degrades it, and it's still there, it's still going on, but it's crappier than it was before. That would be the best comparison, I suppose. and even after leaving, it is the place where you were born. It is the place where many of your loved ones still are, where your family still is, and you worry about them. You wish you could be with your friends and such, with your family, and you worry about bad things happening to them. So you just keep looking at the news, keep up to date with all this stuff, and yeah, it's kind of sad. Because of all the inflation stuff, the economic problems in general, and it's becoming more expensive for the country to import stuff. So there's a general loss of quality on the things you buy in general. There's less variety of things as well. With a poor and weak local currency, it's not as easy and as easy to import stuff from abroad. So you see worse stuff being offered in stores and such. Food, for example, the quality of food in Argentina is junk in comparison to what you have in first world countries. I did a post once in my blog and showed the difference between an Oreo cookie, same brand, Oreo brand cookie in Argentina and Oreo from US. The Oreo from Argentina was smaller, was like the drawings were less detailed, and it looked like gray, and it tastes actually worse. The American one is bigger and tastes better. It's the same brand, but they do it worse quality for the South American market. Same thing with Cadbury chocolate, for example. Most chocolates of those same brands are made in Brazil, and the chocolate is much worse than those being made in Europe or US. I suppose that as the crisis affects more places and such, the quality of products in general will degrade and become worse. Companies looking for a way of keeping offering those same products at a less price without taking that price to the consumer will decrease the quality of the products being offered. That's something that may be happening in other places. As I learn more and more, not only from my personal experience in Argentina, but also learning. I mean, I receive emails from people all over the world, especially from countries going through tough times. I have several people in different countries sending me stuff and keeping me up to date. And one of the things I learned is that we are all much more similar than we like to think. Especially my friends in US. Sometimes you get these emails from, yeah, well, here it's different, and here, well, if an economic collapse happens here in US, the rest of the world goes down because we are number one. I know how great US is. I know that. But unfortunately, I think that we are more similar than we like to think. And I noticed that comparing with what people tell me from other places, even very different places like South Africa. I have a friend there that go ask mom. I'll help you later. Go. Bye. Yeah, my son, sorry for that. We're more similar than we like to think. And this guy from South Africa, he was telling me that he was visiting Buenos Aires. He was looking for a way out of South Africa. He was actually looking at Uruguay. Then he ended up in Australia. And he was saying, the way criminals behave as well is almost the same. It's almost the same as he was seeing over there in South Africa. The tactics used to attack neighborhoods and such, it's similar. So, just a little bit more laid-back type of video talking about all these sort of things and what it's life in general. There's lots of misconceptions regarding that, what an economic collapse would be like. There's many fantasies of, we're going to be king of the hills, and we're going to be with my gang or my buddies ruling the streets and the subdivision and all that stuff. Especially when you think of life still going on. You still have to show up to work. You still have to make an income. That income is not getting you enough. There's still crime on the streets and all that, but you still have to go on with everything else. So you don't get a free ticket. Guys, that's basically it. If you have any questions, anything, just let me know. If you like these videos, consider subscribing as well. Take care. See you in our next video. Have a great day.